What's up, guys? Stan here from Rocky Creek. Today is one of the best and worst days that come on our homestead twice a year, and that is processing day of our meat birds. Now, for those of you that have been with us for a while, you have watched us raise various types of meat birds. These here are Cornish Cross, which we have raised before. We have also raised Red Rangers, and we have also raised gray broilers. Now, me personally, I'm a dark meat guy. I'm very much a fan of the gray broilers, but my wife and my daughter are very much white meat, breast meat type people. And so this year, I decided to raise only Cornish Crosses. And also, if you've been with us, we usually do 2 batches of birds a year. One batch we raise to process whole and freeze in the heat shrink wrap bags. And then the other batch, starting last year, we parted up by using a skinning method when we processed them. That worked out really well for us. It proved to be a lot more versatile overall. Now, some people did get a little bit upset with me when I did the skinning method because they said I wasted a lot of the chicken by disposing of the carcass. Well, the reality is, for my family, that we don't need 40 some carcasses of chickens. The whole carcasses that I do, which is usually 20 to 25 of them in that batch, we do save those carcasses after we eat the meat and use that to make stock. And that's what most people were upset about, was you're wasting so much in bone broth. You know, it's a waste of the chicken. And hey, that's fine. What you got to learn when you do this homesteading lifestyle is that everybody has their own opinions, and that's fine. It doesn't bother me. But you do what's best for your family. And for me and my household, 2 batches at 20 to 25 birds a piece, half whole, half of them parted up in 2 different processings, seems to work out really well. I'm one man who works full time, and for me, it just works out better that way. And so my original plan this year was going to be like normal. We were going to do whole for the first batch and parted out skin second batch. But this year I'm going to switch that up. So today, our processing method for today is going to be the skinning and the parting up method. The reason for that and switching it up is that I still have about 4 to 5 whole chickens, but I'm down to only 1 package of leg quarters from the parted out birds. I'm completely out of the breast meat and the tenderloins. So for me, I would rather have this now because I have the others, and then we're due for our next batch of birds, I believe late August, with the proposed October processing time frame. And so I think that batch I will do whole, and by then I should be used up all the whole chickens from the previous year. But real quickly, because of business of life, I haven't been able to talk much about the meat birds this year. But one thing you may notice about my Cornish crosses is that I have 0 leg problems out of my birds, and I have not had any leg problems out of my birds since I've been raising them, and that's mostly attributed to 3 different reasons. And let's talk about that real quick before we get into processing. Now, the number one thing in trying to eliminate it is research the facility that you're getting them from. I get my Cornish crosses from Myers Poultry, and I have also gotten Cornish crosses from Tractor Supply, and I've also gotten them from Town Line Hatchery. Now, the ones from Town Line overall did fairly well, but we did lose about 4 or so birds when I got them from them. But the Red Rangers I got from Town Line proved to be very healthy and phenomenal birds. The Cornish crosses are just susceptible to a lot more health problems, and that's why they're a little bit harder to raise. It's a double-edged sword. You can get a lot of meat in a shorter amount of time, but you run the risk of greater losses as well because of health issues with the birds. The ones we got from Tractor Supply, which I believe Hoover Hatchery supplies most of their birds, we had a tremendous death rate. We only bought, I believe, about 8 or so because they were just happened to be at the store, and they were a great price because they needed to get rid of them. So that could have been part of the problem, but we had about a 50% loss of those few chickens that we got. Last year I got my Cornish crosses from Myers Poultry, and I think I lost 1 bird, if I remember right, through the process, and I had 0 leg problems out of my birds. And they even advertise in their description that they have bred their birds specifically to reduce or eliminate the leg issues out of their birds. This year, in the batch that I got, I ordered 20. They sent me 22, and I only lost 1 chicken out of that, and that chicken passed I believe it was at the 2nd day mark, so I believe it was just meant not to make it from the get-go. But all the rest of the birds have turned out to be phenomenal. We do have one that seemed to be struggling like that other chick did that passed away, but it ended up surviving. But it's just quite a bit smaller than the rest of them. I don't know what the deal is with that, but it's pulled through, it survived, it's lived its life. But we ordered 20, and at the end of the day, I got 20 birds that are full grown, healthy, and very mobile. And then I do have the one extra bird that's quite a bit smaller than the rest. So number one, research the hatchery that you're gonna buy from. Don't always just buy into the big name hatcheries that all these big channels promote. I did a ton of research online before I came across Myers Poultry, and for the last 2 years, I have bought all of my meat birds from them, which have totaled around close to 100 birds. And I have been nothing but pleased with the quality of birds that I get from them, and the amount of loss I get is so small. So now let's talk about number 2 thing that you need to make sure you do to limit leg issues in your Cornish Cross. Now, we have had a ton of rain over the last few weeks. We've had literally over 3 inches of rain in the last 2-3 days, so their pen is extremely muddy, so don't pay attention to that. But what I want you to focus on is this is their coop at night that they go in at night to sleep. If you notice, there is no feed in that coop. The only thing is one waterer. But what I also do is when I pan around here, there is another waterer all the way over there at the far end of the pen. And if you notice, they're drinking from that waterer. And then also look, feed pans are not anywhere close to the pen. By moving these items away from the pen where they feel comfortable, it forces them to move around and be mobile. Cornish crosses, if you put their feed right there in their coop area, they will literally just lay there and eat and drink and not get up. And at the end of the day, they got to use those muscles in order to keep them strong and to keep up with the growth of their body rate. So I make it a point to put their feed in their water quite a bit of ways away from their coop in order to force them to move around. And this has worked out tremendously for us. Now, some of you who live on very, very small properties and you do the mobile tractor where they're limited in their space, just try to maybe create as much distance between your feed and your water as you can. Put the feed to one far end of the chicken tractor, put your water to the other far end, so at least they have to go back and forth, hopefully, to get the 2 various items versus having them side by side. For me, running the electrified poultry netting around, moving their coop around just to keep them out of their own soil into different spots of the pen, but forcing them to walk around this entire area proves to me to be much more effective. Now, step number 3, if you notice, feed pans are empty. That is not because today is processing day. I actually did feed these birds this morning. Some people do not feed their birds on processing day to limit what's in their body, but as I've gotten pretty good at processing, that doesn't bother me anymore. I can kind of work my way around it now that I'm more experienced. But the key is limit the amount of feed that you give them. I have 20 birds here and I give them 1 scoop of feed per pan twice a day. So in essence, basically what I'm doing is 1 scoop of feed per 10 chickens twice a day. That's kind of the ratio that I've done, and I mostly do that because it just spreads it out from them. They're not eating all day long. They don't have constant availability of the feed. Now the size scoops I have, I don't know exactly what they are. They're the standard sort of rectangular plastic scoops that you can buy at Tractor Supply, and I don't have it heaping over. It's just pretty much close to full to the top, and I dump 1 into each of their pans or each of their feeders if I'm utilizing those, and that works out just fine. Now another thing that I do in particular than just limiting their feed to twice a day is that I also do a mixture of broiler feed and layer feed. Broiler chickens are designed to grow very fast, but with Cornish crosses, sometimes if you're feeding them too much, they can outgrow the development of their legs. And so what I like to do is I like to do a mixture of, I'll do broiler feed for about a week, and then I'll do a couple days of layer feed. They still eat it just fine, and I've noticed though that slows up a little bit of their growth rate just enough that their legs are able to keep up with the development of their body muscle. I also, this is just hypothetical, but when you look at many brands of feed, the layer feed tends to have greater percentages of nutrients with the exception of protein, and to me that may very well aid and assist with bone development and things of that nature that help support the bird's body weight as well. So those are the 3 key things that I have found that I've done. over the few years that I've raised meat birds that it has resulted in me feeling more comfortable about growing a Cornish cross and not having any to very little of the health problems that many people report as to their biggest issue with raising them. So enough of that now. Let's go ahead and go over here and show you the processing setup, and we'll go ahead and get started on working on these birds. So I typically process my birds in a particular area of the property, but for ease of today, I mounted my cone that I use for it right here within their pen, and I have set up the main processing area directly next to it. For me and for ease, this will just keep me from having to go back and forth a whole lot and having to recapture the birds. So as you can tell, these birds come up to me no problem, and so my plan is really just, I'm just gonna grab them as I need to and we'll go from there. But they're plenty good sized birds. I mean, this guy right here is really big, and so I'm very impressed with these, and so I look forward to it. But let me show you the new processing table I have and why I think it's gonna help out tremendously too. Now everything is gonna appear wet because I gave it a thorough cleaning before we got started today, and that's one thing you need to make sure you do is sanitation and hygiene is important when doing this because you're gonna be eating this. But I picked up this table from Stromberg's Poultry, which if you've been following my channel, my knives, a lot of my processing stuff in particular, I really have been happy with the items I've purchased from Stromberg. They did not send me this table on their own. I purchased this just as I have all my stuff from Stromberg, but I've been very pleased. But this is actually their processing slash fillet table, and the reason why I went with theirs, because there's countless online, is because of this right here. Many of the other ones that are sold online, this is plastic. It'll look chrome, but it's really plastic, and a lot of people said that it broke soon thereafter, where this one is actually metal. And so I went with that, and just as that is metal, many of the others have a plastic line here or like a rubber line, versus this had a braided steel line, and I felt better about that as well. Now all the other features are very similar to other filleting or processing tables, where it just has the pipe that comes down from the sink and goes into a bucket. And the only thing I've done with this bucket is I've actually drilled holes in it, so actually the water will keep flowing out. I just don't want it to be splashing, so I'm hoping I won't have to keep dumping the bucket because I don't mind it getting on the ground. And then the top itself is actually very thick, much thicker than a standard fold out plastic table. And then the next thing we have here is we just have our, it's not really a fillet knife, but this is my primary cutting knife for parting up the chicken after it's been dispatched. And I have two of these because I like to have two on hand for if this one begins to dull because maybe I have too much bone contact over time, I have another one ready to go. And then this is our sticking knife or poking knife or whatever you want to call it that I will use to actually dispatch the actual bird. All of my knives are Dexter brand, and both of those were purchased from Stromberg Poultry as well. And then lastly, we have our large cooler here. And since we are going to be doing the parting out, this is what I did last year. I just did a bag of ice on either side to keep temperatures down, but I did not fill it with water last year, and I'm going to do the same this year because I have worries that it's going to make the meat sort of soggy, absorb too much moisture, and then when we go to vacuum seal them, that'll create potential frostbite in the future. I did this last time. It worked extremely well. We had no problems. So that's going to be my plan today. And temperatures today aren't too bad. Highs should be in the upper 70s. It's fairly cool right now, so that should help as well. And then lastly, what I've done is, even though I got a water line running up to this, and I hope to be able to rinse off the birds all that I need to right here, I did run a splitter line, and I do have it connected to a hose handle just in case if I need to spray anything off or if I need to do a cleaning in between. And then we just have some additional buckets here that we will put the chicken carcasses in for disposal at a later time. So essentially the process and plan is going to be bird in the cone, head out the bottom, cut the neck, let the bird bleed out. For us, that's the most humane way that we have the ability to do. From there, bird will go to the table here where it will be skinned, parted up. The meat will then go right there into that cooler. Now I mentioned that this is like the best and worst day on the homestead. And the reason for that is because it's the worst day because nobody should enjoy taking the life of an animal. If you do, you got some problems and you're gonna have to get some help. But there is nothing enjoyable about doing that. But I understand it's a necessary process if we're gonna choose to eat meat here at our house. But it's also the best day because, especially in the way that the world is right now and the cost of stuff and the food supply issues and the way that food in particular affects my skin, with psoriasis, and it's been clear for so many years now, this is an opportunity for me to put a lot of meat into my freezer in about 4 hours of working time, if all goes smoothly like usual. And to know that I can do that, and I've been able to do it here on my property in about 7.5 or so weeks, because we're just shy of 8 weeks with these birds, you know, that's an amazing achievement. It's security for our family, and it's food in our belly that we'll be able to have, and we don't have to rely on a grocery store or supply chain moving forward. So this will give us a good 6 months of food security, and then we know that we got another batch coming in August, and we're just going to further our food security even further. So enough about that. Let's go ahead, let's get the first bird, and let's get rocking and rolling. All right, so I'll try to show you this as much as I can without shaking the camera too bad since it's on the table. But first we'll start by removing the feet, which we put pressure on the joint as we cut that away, like so. And mostly when you're doing skinning, before you start cutting the meat, you're just trying to get rid of stuff that's going to be in your way. So now that those are done, we're going to pinch the skin here, pull it out so we don't cut into the cavity itself. We're just trying to cut just the skin until I get a little pocket. Once I have a little pocket that I can get my fingers in, it's just as much as getting a good grip on it and pull. And you can see how it exposes all of that breast meat right there. Now, what I usually do from here is I tuck the head up inside of there, so then I don't have to fight that either. And then we're gonna get this. I hook the leg where the leg meets the thigh at the joint. I push my finger through the skin, and then I pull the skin up and over the leg. Now this does get kind of slippery, and if you got needle nose pliers to get the last little piece, that's helpful. If not, you just kind of got to get a good grip and take it away like so. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. There's a hole there, slide my hand in, pull, 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 pull it off from the leg. Now, pull it around from the thighs to expose where I need to cut by just pulling the skin back further, exposing all of the thigh and leg quarter. Same thing on the other side, pulling back all that skin until we expose all of the leg quarter. Now that we've got all the meat exposed, we're going to pop the hips by pulling them forward, and you can see right there where the bone sticks out. Once that has popped out, we're ready to cut it. I cut from the bottom in, letting gravity help with the cut, and then right there I have my leg quarter. Starting from the bottom, leg quarter. We're going to cut right along the breastbone on one side, and as I cut into this, I cut layer by layer, because then what will end up happening is you may be able to see right there, it separates, and there's another layer of skin or a membrane, and that's what separates it from the breast to the tenderloin. And then there's actually like a little pocket there that I can stick my finger in to get just that breast off of it. Go away, bumblebee. So then we'll keep it separated from the tenderloin as we continue to cut away the breast. there's our breast. Remove the other breast, cutting layer by layer until I see it separate from the tenderloin right there. Running my finger inside that pocket, cutting the rest of that away. And there's that membrane separating the tenderloin, or chicken tender, whatever you want to call it. Pulling back the breast meat away from the cavity. Other breast. Same thing, right along the breastbone, all the way down until we're at the bottom of it. And then from there, I just like to lift up on it as I'm cutting. And that would be a tenderloin, or chicken tender. I think maybe because I'm right-handed, it seems like cutting the left side of the chicken is much easier, and I can ride that bone so much better. I think just because it's the angles of which I'm cutting. And there's your other tenderloin. So here's your cuts, your 2 tenders, breast, another breast, and then thigh quarter, thigh quarter. We're all done with the processing. All the chickens here in the cooler. I've got it up to the house, and I'll show you what we ended up with. That's a whole lot more chicken than last year. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get this packaged up into food saver bags, and hopefully we can try to figure out our poundage after that. So here's how I packaged all of mine up. We did tenders, the breasts, and the thigh quarters in different packages. The tenders ended up being about 1.5 to 2 pound packages, which equated out to about 8 or so of the tenders. The breasts, since they were so large, we did 3 breasts per package, and we ended up with about 2 pounds per package. And then the leg quarters, for the most part, I ran those 4 to a pack. So guys, the processing's all done, and overall things went pretty good. Now for me, doing the skinning method at times is very beneficial when I'm in a crunch for time and I want to just get some cuts done, because the whole chicken isn't always conducive. But let's talk a little bit about quick cost breakdown. The bird and the feed needed to raise the birds, factor that in with the amount of weight and meat that we got back, is we got very close to 70 pounds of meat. It ended up being like 68 point some odd numbers of pounds. When I divided the poundage from the cost of the birds plus the cost of the feed, we were able to produce this chicken at around $2.22 a pound. And with the current economy, that's great. And it's not only about the economy anymore, as it is so much of the availability of product. The quality is much better. The cost savings is great, but now it's just difficult to get your hands on much of anything. Even things as little as our eggs right now. I have so many people asking me for eggs sometimes because of either availability or cost from the grocery store. And I don't know what's going on with the economy. I don't know how much of stuff going on with supply and demand and stuff is actually impacted by environmental stuff and situations going on overseas, or how much of that is just greed of business. But what I do know is this: by doing this stuff on my own, on my property, makes me not dependent upon whatever they're doing. And so I have great peace knowing that I produced quality food, that I've given us food security, and I was able to do so at a cost that was at or below current market pricing right now. So guys, I hope this helps you out. Yes, there's a lot of ways you can do this. Yes, some of you may do it differently, but for me, this worked out really well. Our next batch of birds should be here in a couple months. Those ones I intend to do our normal plucking and processing whole. But for right now, I got close to 70 pounds of good, healthy, homegrown chicken meat already cut up, ready to go for meal preps. And we'll be enjoying that very much so here as the days go on. So guys, I appreciate you all hanging out with us. If you have any questions about how to process your chickens or anything that we use or do here on our property, please don't hesitate to send that to us. So guys, I hope everybody's doing well. Y'all take care of yourselves, and I'll see you here very soon on one of our next episodes. Thanks, guys.